everybody, it's Amy from Winterwood Studio, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about how I taught myself the skills to be an artist and how you can too. So come on in and let's chat for a little bit. Okay, so this video was a request from a viewer, and they had asked me if I was a self-taught artist or if I had been to school. And for the most part, I am a completely self-taught artist. I did not have any art classes like all through high school or anything like that. I just liked drawing and painting, and I did it on my own. I went to college, university, and I had planned to be a doctor, and I did, I think, like the first year and a half, and then I had trouble with one of the harder chemistry classes and I got a C. So at that point I was told I should probably pivot and pick something else, and I'd always been interested in art, so at that point I took some art history classes along with some philosophy and religions classes because I also like that stuff. And then I decided that I would work towards a major in art history with a minor in studio art. I did, I think 2 semesters of studio art as a minor, which was 2 oil painting classes and a printmaking class. The printmaking class was good, the oil painting classes were no good. The teacher wasn't even there half the time. There was just supplies and you were just supposed to go in and paint. There was no instruction whatsoever. So I wouldn't call that any sort of teaching. The printmaking class was good though. They taught us a lot in that one. And then at that point I'd done like 3.5 years and I got sick and I could not continue on with school. So I did not get a degree. Everything I've learned, I've mostly learned myself, and I thought I would share the 6 resources that I use to teach myself how to draw and paint. The first thing was YouTube, and also Instagram to a lesser degree. So you should go on to YouTube and Instagram and follow artists in the mediums that you are interested in learning. Do some of their tutorials, follow some of their techniques, watch, that's very key, watch them do what you want to learn how to do. There's nothing more instructive than watching an artist do what you want to learn to do. You can get so much out of that, even if they don't even say anything. If you watch it really closely, you can get so much out of that. So I'm going to do specifically the YouTube artists that I started out watching because that's really how I got started. So the very first one I watched was Stephanie Law. She's a watercolor artist, like a fantasy watercolor artist, and her stuff is spectacular. I will link everybody I mentioned down below so you can go check them out too. And she also has books, which I'll get to in a minute. But she was one of the first ones I started watching, and I learned so much from her as far as watercolors. So much. I highly recommend her YouTube site and her Patreon, which we will get to again in a minute. So the second artist I watched a lot when I was getting started was Margaret Morales. I don't know how active she is on YouTube now, but all of her old videos are still up there. She is another great one to watch if you're learning watercolor. She mostly does like fantasy anime style figures, but I learned a ton of watercolor techniques from her too as well. And then the third one that I was watching a lot when I very first got started was Chuck Black. He does mostly wildlife and landscapes with oil paints, and his stuff is just spectacular as well. And then also Lachri Fine Arts. She does a range of different mediums, so you can check out, she has so many tutorials, so many. You could watch her stuff and nobody else and have instruction for years. So she does, oil paint, acrylic, colored pencil, watercolor. She does like the Inktense pencils. She does a little bit of pastel. She does airbrushing. There's just so much you can learn from her. So she's another great one to watch. As far as oil painting, I also watch Andrew Tischler and The Paint Coach. Those are some great ones to watch. And then also Christy Rebecca Fine Art has so much pastel things that you can learn. She does more realistic and especially animals. And then Susan Jenkins, which is Monet Cafe, for more impressionistic style stick pastels. She's great. I've mentioned her before. These last 3 are more Instagram, I think, related. But Iris Complete, I don't know if I'm saying her name right. She does like fantasy watercolor and pen and wash, and her stuff is amazing. And then Loish, which I'm sure you've probably heard of her if you've been in the art world for long. She is predominantly digital art, but she talks so much about like color theory and perspective and having engaging active lines in your drawing, and just you can learn so much from her even if you're not doing specifically digital art. Another person I was watching a lot of, and she is YouTube actually, is Mimi Moo Illustration. And her stuff is more like a cutesy illustration style. But she actually taught me a lot about like being an artist as like a business, and then also how to simplify designs and color palettes and color theory and simplifying shapes. So she's another really good one to watch too. Plus her illustrations are really fun. YouTube and to some extent Instagram. Find an artist you like, watch them create their stuff, do their tutorials, you'll learn a ton. And now before we get into the books, guys, I'm gonna ask you a favor. If you haven't liked and subscribed yet and you're enjoying this video and getting something out of it, or if you've enjoyed my other videos, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. And I'd like to keep making videos, so if you could, please like and subscribe. Every little bit helps, and I would really appreciate it. Okay, so then the second one, which if you've seen any of my other videos where I talked about my books, is books. I have a whole bunch of art books. I've only picked a selection to show you here today. We'd be here for hours if I showed you all my art books. Okay, so I mentioned, first of all, they're all stacked right here, so I'm grabbing some of them. Okay, so the first thing you need to do if you're doing like humans and animals, but humans, and I'm gonna cover this up. This cover has I don't think you can show this cover on YouTube without getting a ding. So I will just, to the best of my abilities, cover that up. But this is an Anatomy, a complete guide for artists. And then this line here, let me put down the sketchy one. This is the Morpho Anatomy for Artists. This one is simplified forms, but they have a whole series of books. Like they have faces and hands and feet. All of them are good. They're all great. I highly recommend all of these for, again, I can't show the inside, but I highly recommend all of these for learning anatomy, plus this other book that I just showed you. If you're doing animals, you're going to need something like this. This is called Fundamentals of Creature Design, and it has fantasy creatures, but if I can show you here. So it's about fantasy creatures, but they have the anatomy of like actual real life animals. Like here's a section on wings. I'll see if I can lower the contrast on that so you can see it a little bit better when I'm editing it. Lizard anatomy. It's got all the animals. So you really need to, for humans and animals, you are going to have to study the anatomy. You're going to have to draw and draw and draw and draw until you can do it correctly. For humans and animals, it's extremely noticeable if you don't have the anatomy right. And we all are guilty of making mistakes. But you know, it's really important. It is. It's important to have the anatomy correct. So you need some good anatomy books. Okay, so then the next thing I would recommend in books, there's so many here, I'm gonna have to put some on the floor. All right, is you're gonna need a couple good art history books. These are my two favorites that I saved from college. I've had these for over 20 years now, and I saved these two. They were my textbooks. They're not cheap. I bought them, and I like them so much that I saved them. No, this is like the more ancient art. And then like really ancient, like Egyptian and all of that stuff. And then this is the more recent art. And this is the one that I really love the most. This is like through medieval all the way up to, I mean, it's got the triumph of the modernist art. Here's Henry Matisse. There's so much you can learn from just looking at the works of like the masters. I highly recommend having some books where you, and it doesn't have to be specifically art history, but, and then that takes me on to my next point. And I have like books on Monet and Degas and everything. This one is one of my favorites. This is the art of Mucha. Mucha? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But he's one of my favorite artists. The pictures in here are just, I mean, his works are just gorgeous. I love his line work. I love the way he stylizes things. He's a real inspiration to me, and that's the key. You want to have some books from artists that inspire you so that when you're feeling stuck, you can just go and look through them. Here are two more by artists that inspire me. This is the art of Alla. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. And then Stephanie Law. I have all of her books. I just picked one to show you. She's a watercolor artist, and she has some just like tutorials in here in this one and pictures of her works, and I've learned a bunch from her books about watercolor. And Alla, she is like sort of like a watercolor artist, but she uses inks more than watercolor. And I just love, and she is a little bit of a mixed media artist because sometimes she'll use colored pencils on top of her watercolors, which I love. She's also often does line work with her stuff. Can you even see that? Sorry if that was off camera. But I love her stuff as well. She's a big inspiration to me. So, and then you're going to want some books in like basic instruction. I have the pen and ink one by Alfonso Dunn. He's one of my really big inspirations for my pen and ink, and was one of the first artists that got me started back when I started back on my art journey. He has a good YouTube channel with a lot of info too if you're interested in pen and ink. This one was another book that I used a lot back at the beginning. This is Lee Hammond's All New Big Book of Drawing, Beginner's Guide to Realistic Drawing Techniques, and it covers graphite and colored pencil, I believe, is what she covers in here. And there's a lot of info, like here's a little tutorial on how to draw feathers, eyes. This is in the graphite section. Blending skin tones with colored pencils. She has tutorials. This is another great book. And then I think every artist should have this, whether you're a painter or not. This is Color and Light, a guide for the realist painter. This book is invaluable. You should for sure have this book if you're an artist. It has taught me so much. It's just an incredible book. Maybe all my other books, but I highly recommend this to every new person who's beginning. I really think art is about capturing the light. That's one of my big inspirations for art, is trying to capture light and the way things are lit. And this book really helps with that. Plus it has like basic stuff like, you know, perspective and color theory and everything. So this is definitely one I recommend. So those are the few books that I chose to show you. Like I said, I have lots and lots more. And then number 3 is artist magazines. And I have a selection of those. I have a selection of those here as well. I subscribe to 3. I've heard that there's a sticker on this one. There's a pastel, the pastel journal. I think I would like to subscribe to too if it's still being made. Somebody mentioned it the other day. But the ones that I get right now are Colored Pencil magazine. It features like an artist every month, and they talk about their methods and what they use, and it's got some little tutorials, and they have lots of contests, and they do like product reviews. This is a great magazine. And then and that one comes out every month. And then I have these other 2 only come out I think 4 times a year, but this is the Watercolor Artist. And this is, if you want to get into watercolor, this is definitely something you should get. I've learned so much from this magazine, and it has been so extremely helpful. I would highly recommend that you get this magazine if you're a watercolor artist. And then the other magazine is called the Artist Magazine, and they do different mediums each month. Like this was, I think, one that came out around October one year, so it's got a lot of pen and ink stuff in it. I think this one was like maybe a collage one or mixed media. But they, you know, jump around. There's a little bit of everything in here, and it's very inspirational. And they'll talk about like, you know, old artists and art history and new artists and the way they work. And it's just, again, a really great magazine to have. And again, I'll try to link all these down below, or at least put a list. I don't know if you can link to magazines, but I'll try. The 4th resource is online classes. So you can learn a whole lot online. You don't have to do in-person classes. And the good thing about online classes are that they are often much cheaper than in-person classes, and for sure cheaper than trying to get a degree in art. So some of the classes that I've taken, so my favorite site for art classes is Domestika. I'm not sponsored by them. I don't have affiliate links with them. I personally, myself, have bought 38 classes. No, 39. I bought one last weekend. I bought 39 classes from their website. And the good thing about their website is that the classes will go on sale a lot, and you can get them for like $9.99. I will link maybe like my top 5 down below so you can check them out. I have been taking classes from them for 3 years now, and I love them. They're just awesome. You can learn pretty much anything you want to learn. The classes come in multiple different languages. If you like take one where the instructor is speaking Spanish and you don't know Spanish, they have English subtitles, so that's not a problem. And vice versa. The English classes have other language subtitles down below, so you can still take the class. And it is just a great, inexpensive resource for learning art. And then, okay, so then I've taken some, oil painting classes that were not as cheap. I took 2 of the paint coaches classes. I can't remember the titles offhand. I will link those down below too. I've taken 3, I think, of Andrew Tischler's oil painting classes. I took one of his portrait classes and a landscape class, and I can't remember the third one. I should have prepared a little bit better, but I'll link those down below as well. And then the other artist I've taken online oil painting classes from was Lane Johnson, and I took his cloud one and the underpainting one, I think, are the 2 that I took. So I will link those down below too. Out of the 3, I'd say my favorite was probably Andrew Tischler's classes. So if you're painting in a realistic oil painting style, that's who I would recommend for that. I think you get the most bang for your buck from his classes. And again, not affiliated, not sponsored. These are just personal things that I've used to teach myself what I wanted to learn on my journey as an artist. So that was number 4. And then number 5 is Patreon. So if you follow an artist on YouTube and they have a larger following, they usually will have a Patreon as well. And they have more in-depth tutorials and classes and longer ones. And after Domestika, Patreon is probably the site that I use the most for learning in my various art mediums. So I have followed many people over the last 3 years, but some of the standouts that I have followed and really enjoyed were Stephanie Law. Again, we saw her book and I linked her YouTube channel. That would be for watercolor. Or I've done the Patreon tutorials with Annie Stegg. She's an oil painter. She's realistic but fantasy, and her stuff is amazing. And I forgot to mention her back in the YouTube and Instagram section, but she's on Instagram. I don't think YouTube, I don't know, but I first started following her on Instagram. And she is just an amazing painter, and she paints in like an underpainting and then glazing style, which is just spectacular. And then Emma I don't know if I'm saying her last name right, but Emma Tildesley, she does colored pencil, and specifically botanical colored pencil, and she has some very, very awesome tutorials on her Patreon if you're interested in colored pencil. And then Lachri Fine Art, as I mentioned in YouTube, she has like hundreds of Patreon only tutorials. I think it's something crazy like 400 or 500, I don't know, but it would take you years to get through all of her stuff. So she is a wonderful resource, and hers is fairly inexpensive. I think you get access to most of her tutorials at the $4 a month level, so that is awesome too if you're on a budget. And then Andrew Tischler and the Paint Coach and Chuck Black, oil and acrylic painters, they're all on there, and they have some very great resources as well. And then Loish and Mimi Moo, who I also mentioned earlier, and our digital artists also have Patreons. The Mimi Moo one is a lot of fun. She does like a monthly illustration challenge, and everybody joins in, and there's a lot of discussion, and it's a lot of fun. Hers is. And Loish is just, if you're trying to learn digital art, or even if you're not, just she breaks things down beautifully. Just technically, and she gets into the color theory and what makes a good composition. She is an excellent teacher. I highly recommend her. Those are my 5 resources for a self-taught artist. And then number 6 isn't really a resource, but it's practice. Practice, practice, practice. You're going to need to practice every day. Try to draw something every day. Try to paint every day. Whatever your medium is, try to do at least 15 minutes a day. You can't get better if you don't do it. You can't get better if you don't practice. So definitely put the time in. That's really all there is. Just practicing, practicing, practicing. If you can, have another artist critique your work, or just be really self-critical. Like, does something look off here? Did I overwork something? Is the anatomy not right? Try to find your weak spots and zero in on those, and really try to get stronger in the areas that are not your best. So I hope that those resources were helpful. If there's anything else you'd like to know or anything else you'd like to see, just drop your questions down below. I'm more than happy to answer them. Thank you for everybody who has liked and subscribed to my channel. If you haven't already, please do so. The subscribe and like are down below. And until next time, everybody, happy creating.